We're going to get started, and we may have a few more folks show up, but we are very appreciative. We've got a good attendance today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come. My name is Matty Stinchfield. I'm the Guilford Town Tree Warden, and I'm pleased to bring you some really great conversations today on Beech Lead Disease, which, if you've looked into the understory around the woods here in Guilford, you certainly have identified the lack of leaves on beech trees and the damage caused by the Beech Lead Disease, which only arrived here a couple of years ago. The format for today's discussion is we've got a couple of experts from the state. First, Savannah Ferreira. How do I say that? Ferreira, thank you. Plant biologist from the state. Is going to talk about the disease itself, show us some slides. And then Jackie Como, who's a wildlife biologist with a specialty in black bears, is going to do the same, identifying the relationship between black bears and beeches. And in those two conversations, we're really not trying to solve anything. We're trying to learn what the basic ground rules are for Beech Lead Disease. And then we'll have a couple other folks come up here. County Forester Sam Schnesky is with us today, and Alex Lacey, who's the outreach coordinator for Wyndham Solid Waste, is here to answer questions about better management of our garbage, compost, beehives, and things like that, so that we're not making the bear problem worse. And I'll ask you to save your questions till the panel at the end. And I have a series of questions I'll ask the panelists as well, so that we can try to track all of the important conversations that we need to have today. And then our goal for finishing up is for each of us to leave here with maybe a positive uptick of encouragement about what we might be able to do personally in terms of Beech Lead Disease, how we can interact with the beech trees for sure, the wildlife that are related, what other things can we do in the forest that might be helpful, and give you each an opportunity to act positively in the forest in your own way. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and introduce Savannah Ferreira from the state, and she's going to talk about Beech Lead Disease.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me today. So I'm Savannah Ferreira, I use she, her pronouns. I'm a forest health specialist with the state of Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. So let's talk about the science of Beech Lead Disease. So first, to start off, what is Beech Lead Disease? This is a novel disease that affects all species and age classes of beech in North America. So this is our native American beech, as well as our ornamental, oriental, Chinese, and European beech species. Now this isn't really a disease like we are saying it is, like Beech Lead Disease, the common name's wrong. It's actually damage associated with a leaf gall nematode, Lydiolancus crenate bassoonii. That's a nematode picture of the Beech Lead Disease nematode there. That's taken with an electron scan microscope, so it's very tiny. There's still a lot that we don't know about Beech Lead Disease. We're not really sure where it's from. Right now, we're thinking Japan, but that's not a concrete fact yet. It was first detected in Ohio in 2012 and then into Vermont in 2023. Do we know how it got here? We do not. We think it can be spread by wind. It can also spread throughout the stand more locally through rain splash. But there's also been newer studies that are showing that birds feeding on infested beech buds and then caterpillars feeding on infested beech leaves can also transmit it successfully to other trees. So before going into what this looks like on the landscape, I just wanted to first back up and talk about what a nematode is. Because I'm sure many of us, this might be the first time we're hearing what a nematode is. So nematodes are in the phylum Nematoda. It's part of the animal kingdom, and it's actually one of the most abundant animals on Earth. They're mostly observed as free living, so they're these tiny microscopic worms that are typically eating like spores or microbes and not really causing a lot of damage. There can be both plant parasitic and animal parasitic nematodes. The animal parasitic ones are like your cat's like heartworm. Those things can get up to about 3 feet long in some species. But what we're talking about today is a plant parasitic nematode. And that's a diagram of what a plant parasitic nematode looks like. It's a little hard to see from this photo, but up where would be at the top of its head if it had one, kind of like the top of this diagram, is a stylet and a stylet knob. And the stylet is basically just this really sharp tongue that goes out and is able to puncture plant cell walls, right? Because plants have those really thick, rigid plant cell walls, so this is really efficient to get in and out of it. Now, plant parasitic nematodes cause damage by feeding. This motion of being able to jab into a plant cell is going to create a hole. That hole could get infested by another disease. It could be an entry point for disease to establish. Nematodes can also accidentally vector other pathogens like viruses or bacteria. And as they're feeding on the plant tissue, they can secrete enzymes that some plants are able to have a reaction with that causes galls or a disorganization of plant cells to form around it. So, so when we're talking about beech leaf disease nematodes, or just nematodes at large, there's plant parasitic nematodes for almost all plants in North America or in the world, but they're at a really small scale. So they might be like 20 or 100 plant parasitic nematodes at the base of a red oak tree. The red oak tree doesn't even know it's there. It's part of the natural microbiome in our environment. It's serving its important factor there. But when we have economies of scales, like we see in our invasive or introduced and ecologically harmful species, we're talking about tens of thousands of nematodes on a single plant. So there's multi-thousands of nematodes even within a single leaf.
Whoa.
Yeah. So the next few photos I want to show is just the progression of beech leaf disease in North America. So this is going to be a time series map, and then on the bottom corner here we have the native range of American beech in North America. So as you can see, it started in Ohio in 2012. It's kind of that like whitish yellow there around Lake Erie, and then it spread out somewhat far in 7 years. I think as far as a lot of our invasives go, this to me is incredibly fast, but it started getting picked up in 2019. It was overlooked for such a long time because at first we thought this was a foliar disease. And in the world of plant ecology, foliar diseases don't typically kill trees. It was only later found out that it was because of a nematode, and that's kind of put it in a different category that's causing more damage. So in 2019, there was a pop-up infestation in Long Island, New York, and parts of Connecticut. Right now, we don't know if we missed observations through Pennsylvania and New York, or if that was a secondary introduction. But by 2020, we're picking up parts of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, we're much further into Connecticut. By 2021, we're up into Maine, New Jersey, most of Pennsylvania here is taken up. By 2022, it's all of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, it's all of Pennsylvania. We're down into Virginia, New Jersey, much further west into Ohio and Michigan. Oh, and New Hampshire, which is important to point out here. And then Vermont in 2023. We were the last New England state to actually find beech leaf disease on our landscape. And at the end of 2023, we only found it in one county, which was, and we had it in Dummerston and Verdon first. By 2024, our one county jumped to 5. And as you can see, we also got much further south into Maryland, Delaware. So by the end of 2024, we have most of the northeastern distribution of American beech now has beech leaf disease. Now there is a glimmer of hope for me when I look at this map, because there's still parts of upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and southern Maine that don't yet have detections, as well as further into Quebec and Ontario. So I don't have a 2025 map to share with you yet because this is a federally published map, and the field season is still going for some of our southern states. But I can show you what I refer to as my crazy person map. This is not really a map I typically use for public outreach because I know it's really messy. This is something that I use with my team. We have a forest health team that works on this disease. On the left here, I don't know which way you're facing, sorry. We have 2024 beech leaf disease detections and surveys. The dark green is showing that we have Vernon and Dummerston as our first detection, and then the rest of that green is what we found in 2024 through our surveys. So there was over 400 surveys on this map, and we were able to bring it up to 5 counties. What's really interesting in Vermont is we have a one-town confirmation in Chittenden County, so it's all the way up there in the Jericho Research Forest. Right now, we haven't been able to find it outside of Jericho, but it's pretty interesting that that's where it popped up. But for the most part, it looks like our infestation is coming up through the Connecticut River Valley of southern Vermont. Here's our 2025 map so far. On the other side, as you can see, we just picked up one new county this year, which was Rutland County. And for the most part, I think we had only about 10 towns that we were able to find anything in this year. So it wasn't as drastic as last year, but it is moving north. So in addition to doing those surveys with our forest health team, we also work with the U.S. Forest Service and all of the eastern states on long-term monitoring plots for beech leaf disease. So every state has somewhere between like 6 and 10 beech leaf disease monitoring sites. These are the locations of ours. As you will notice, we're missing Windsor and Windham County here, where we have all of our beech leaf disease in Vermont. This was because we had some stricter guidelines of where we could put these plots, including basal area of beech, how many trees per acre, how close it was to streams and vernal pools, because we weren't sure if water was a really significant factor, and then access to it on public land. So that's kind of why this fell out where we're seeing beech leaf disease. But in addition to these plots, we've picked up some of our less permanent long-term monitoring plots where we're looking at some of the same sites in both Windsor and Windham County and revisiting towns that we already know are infested to take our own surveys, similar to what we're doing at these long-term monitoring plots, just so we can see the progression. So we're not forgetting about Windsor and Windham, we just have to collect the data a little bit differently. So when you're looking for beech leaf disease on the landscape, what are you looking for? Not this microscopic worm. You're looking for striping in the leaves. And this is thicker than normal tissue. It happens in between the leaf veins. Can I pass these to you? I have a few to go around. I want you to hold this up to the lights and look from below, because this is the easiest way to see the banding. Over time, this banding is going to lead to leaf deformation, and they're just kind of going to get really crinkled. Later, they will become disformed. They can be this chlorotic banding, which that black Riker mount actually shows the yellowing a lot better, but that's something that can be picked up later in the fall, especially if you're doing roadside surveys, it sticks out a lot better, and that's just because it's having a nutrient deficiency, so it's kind of shutting down those areas of the leaves prior to the leaf color change. So beech leaf disease infested bud scales, so what's happening in that banding is what's on a cellular level. So nematodes are overwintering inside of the buds, and then they're affecting the leaf as it's developing, so the leaf primordia. So in the spring, when the buds break and the leaves flush out, the damage that you see is the damage that you're going to get. So it's not going to progress throughout the growing season. If you have 5 bands on a leaf at the start of the growing season, you're going to have 5 bands on the leaf at the end of the growing season, if your tree is able to keep that leaf on. Some trees are able to drop those leaves and flush out a new leaf, and if they're able to do so, that new leaf will actually be asymptomatic, which is kind of interesting. So because they're in the buds, these are just showing different severities of infested bud scales. The top, or 0, is our normal American beech bud, and then 1 through 4 is increasing severity of beech leaf disease symptoms. And without cluttering the slide with numbers, you can just tell from looking at this that the more severely infested the bud is, the more disfigured, stunted, disformed, discolored this looks. If we zoom in on a microscopic scale, the top 3 photos are showing your non-infested beech bud scale tissue, and the bottom is showing infested. You can see the top is flat, regularly shaped cells. Plant cells are so neat because they have that cell wall. They're able to stay very organized. But with this leaf gall nematode, it causes these to be irregularly sized and shaped. So everything becomes a jumbled mess. So if we switch over to beech leaf disease infested leaves, on this side you're looking at beech leaf disease infested leaf on the top and then a normal non-infested leaf on the bottom. And these 2 photos are showing leaf veination. So at the top you can see that we have really thick veins. We don't have a lot of those smaller subveins that we see in a healthy leaf tissue. Like here we have a main vein, we have subveins, and then we have tinier subveins off of that. We lose that distinction when we have beech leaf disease. And then those veins get thicker. Do we know why or what this is causing? Not really at this second, but it is an interesting thing I just wanted to share. If we look at a cross-section of our beech leaf disease infested leaves compared to our normal leaves, so in the middle that's going to show our normal leaves, and on the right side is when they're infested. You can see that in our normal one, that middle picture is showing the different layers of your leaf. So you have an upper epidermis, which is just the top, or lower epidermis, which is the bottom. Off the top, you have a palisade layer. They look like little fingers hanging down. This is where most of your photosynthesis happens. And then everything else you can just lump into a spongy mesophyll layer, and that's where most of your gas exchange is happening. So when you compare this middle photo to F, so we're looking from C to F, you can see that this clear distinction between the layers is lost. Everything looks like a jumbled mess. Like I can't confidently pick out what's doing photosynthesis, what's doing gas exchange. It's all messed up. In addition, although the upper and lower epidermis are still there, they're not really flat anymore. They're really cratered. You have a lot more surface area, and at least for this comparison in this photo series, your non-infested leaf tissue is about half the size of your infested one, so it is much thicker as well. So there's other signs and symptoms you can be looking for that's nothing to do with the leaves. One is bud abortion. So this is crispy, empty buds on the end of an affected branch. The tree puts in all of this energy thinking that it's going to create a leaf inside of the bud. They are unable to use their energy to create that leaf, so it's just like crispy, empty paper. Over time, if you're not producing leaves, you're going to have dieback. Dieback is typically starting in the lower canopy and working its way up. This is something that's really common with our foliar diseases, which is why it was thought it was a foliar disease at first. And then eventually you will see mortality within 2 to 7 years. Now, sapling mortality in like smaller pole-sized trees are going to happen a lot faster than that 7 years, but this is a pretty good window that we're seeing with other states. This is a really great photo from my counterpart in Rhode Island. This is one of their long-term beech leaf disease monitoring plots. And as you can see, well, maybe you can't see from there, but all of those overstory trees were actually American beech. And you can see there's no leaves. This is middle of summer. They should all be really foliated, but they recently died because you still have that like really fine tip dieback there. But what's underneath? Those are invasive plants. So that's just something to keep in mind, like something else has to come in its place. So we do have the advantage of being the last New England state to have beech leaf disease, so we're learning a lot from our neighbors. I wanted to share this case study with you. Ohio has these long-term monitoring plots, like every forest health team does. We have them in Vermont as well, where we're just going out and we're assessing a particular tract of land for certain metrics every single year. We have data sets in Vermont that are over 40 years old. For cases like this, when we have something pop up in the forest, we have things to compare it to. So they took a subset of this data, started it in 2011, and then ended this study in 2023. But by 2020 to 2011 in this study, they saw less than 1% annual mortality of American beech on this plot. That's pretty average for what we see in the Northeast. They could die from beech bark disease. That's like a lightning strike. That's wind throw. That's pretty average. Now, beech leaf disease was found in Ohio in 2012, which is that second bar there, but it wasn't found in this plot until 2014. So I marked that with an arrow, and if you go 2 years later, they saw a significant uptick in mortality in 2016. And then from 2016 to the end of this study in 2023, you can see that this was just an exponential increase in mortality as they continued monitoring this. So from 2011 to 2023, they saw 78% of their trees dying from beech leaf disease in this plot. 72% of that mortality happened in that last 3 years. So what's missing? Again, this is a relatively new pest. Yes, it was first found in North America in 2012, but that's a decade's not enough time for science to have all the answers. So we're missing details on how this disease is impacting forest ecosystems long term, and I think Jack is going to do a really great presentation talking about this next. We're also missing effective ways to manage this disease on a forested landscape. There's some fungicides that we can use on urban landscapes or like single tree, which we can talk about in the panel, but it's nothing that we're able to apply in a very forested setting or like a large scale. We also don't know how suckers are affected. How many times can a sucker get beech leaf disease, die, resucker, get beech leaf disease and die before the root system gives up? We don't know. And then we don't know if there's any tolerance to beech leaf disease. Like, is there lingering beech out there? So I want everybody to take a deep breath, because it feels heavy in this room right now. And I know it does. But I want to just share a few other invasive / introduced and ecologically harmful pests that we have in Vermont. Not to add doom and gloom, but I'm hoping to just shift your perspective and kind of walk away with like a little bit more hope than you're feeling right now in this moment. Emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer is an invasive pest. This is a wood-boring insect with ash that's causing pretty significant mortality in the United States and Vermont as well. On paper, we see about 85% mortality within 3 to 5 years. Now, we've had emerald ash borer present since 2018 when we first found it in Plainfield, Vermont, and since then it has spread to 13 out of our 14 counties, and it is causing pretty significant dieback. However, since 2018, we have been able to find and deploy biocontrol agents, which we're doing at several sites in Vermont. This is actually a photo showing our successful biocontrol in L.R. Jones State Forest, which was our first detection. This photo makes me really happy because you can actually see the pupa of our biocontrol agents feeding on the emerald ash borer, which is great, like it worked. We also know that there's insecticide treatment. We're treating trees on state land. We have the resources to give information to the public so they can treat on private land. We're taking part in seed saving initiatives, and then we're on the lookout for lingering ash because we know now that lingering ash exists, that there's ash trees that are naturally resistant to emerald ash borer. Hemlock woolly adelgid. Hemlock woolly adelgid has, on textbook paper, mortality rates within 5 to 6 years. We've had hemlock woolly adelgid in Vermont since 2007. Hemlock woolly adelgid was actually first introduced to the United States, I think it was 2001, into Virginia, and it ripped through the mid-Atlantic like wildfire. We thought we were losing eastern hemlock in its entirety in the United States. It was a really scary time. But as it marched further into New England, it slowed down significantly. And that's because at the time we didn't know, but now we know that it's cold intolerant. So the same winters that give us our delicious maple syrup every year is also helping to keep our hemlock woolly adelgid populations in check. And we actually only have hemlock woolly adelgid in 3 of our 14 counties, even though it's been here since 2007. We also have insecticide treatments available. We also are releasing biocontrol agents in several of our infested state parks, and we know that lingering hemlock exists. And one of the biggest pros I think of this, just thinking about hemlock woolly adelgid as a model, is that we can even start looking for lingering hemlock yet because we haven't even seen that much mortality. You need about 85% mortality in order to look for your naturally resistant species. We only just started reporting hemlock woolly adelgid associated mortality in 2023. So from 2007 to 2023, we're just seeing our Vermont, some of our Vermont hemlocks die. And then lastly is beech bark disease. So on paper, beech bark disease has a 50% mortality within 10 years. Now, we've had beech bark disease on at least some level throughout the state since the 1960s. This is a native pathogen and an introduced scale insect. The scale insect was brought into Nova Scotia in the late 1800s. It wasn't super well documented of like where it got into Vermont and how fast it spread, but by 1960s, I can find state reports of just saying like, yep, it's everywhere, it's a problem. It's been a few more than 10 years since the 1960s, and we still have American beech on our landscape. That's why you guys are here today. It's because we're talking about American beech because it's still here. So even though we have this additional stressor of beech leaf disease, I'm hoping that you can understand that we're still very early in the scientific process. Maybe in 5 years I can come back and I can tell you about all of the fun biocontrols and treatments that we have, and it can feel a little bit more hopeful. But for now, I'm not going to take questions, but I just wanted to give you a chance to get my contact information down. I have my email and my phone up here, and then if you don't remember this, btinvasives.org. If you submit a report for anything, that comes to my email as well. So if that's easier to remember, that's fine.
And I'll give the mic over to Jackie Como, state wildlife biologist.
Thank you. All right, so as Savannah said, I'm going to talk more about the ecological role of beech trees in Vermont with a thought towards what might be coming with beech leaf disease. So real quick, I work for Vermont Fish and Wildlife. Our mission is the conservation of Vermont's fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the people of Vermont. It's a really big, broad mission, so we have to have a lot of strategies to set priorities in the state to achieve this mission. And thinking about key habitats that support a wide suite of animals is one of those strategies we use. And so beech forests are one of those habitat types that we do put a lot of priority into thinking about how to protect those, how to manage for them, how to conserve them long term, because we know that they're an integral part of the food web here in Vermont. So we have a lot of different species that like to feed on beech nuts, everything from deer, bear, down to tiny little mice. And then of course, those species then help support a lot of our predators in the state as well. So the availability of beech nuts in the state kind of has this echo effect across the ecosystem. And again, we put a lot of emphasis thinking about beech habitat conservation. We put a lot of focus on bears because we know that beech nuts here in Vermont are a really important food source for our bears. Beech trees, their strategy with all of those seed predators on the landscape are to create these masting pulses. So they have these periodic pulses where they produce a lot of nuts, and then they have periods where they don't produce any nuts. And this is to try to overwhelm those seed predators in the years that they do produce a lot of nuts, so that some of those nuts can become seedlings, but then to take years off from producing nuts to try to starve out those seed predators. And so what we've been seeing here in Vermont is that typically our beech trees, for the most part, are producing nut crops every other year. A neat thing about bears is that an adult female bear reproduces every other year as well. And research back in the 90s in Maine, looking at some of their bear populations, they found that where beech nuts are a dominant food source for bears, they saw synchronized reproduction in their bear population with those beech nut cycles. So the majority of their females in those populations were giving birth to cubs in the winters following a good beech nut crop. And that's because it's providing such a high quality food source for those bears. It's putting them in that nutritional advantage where they can support a higher litter of cubs. And so here in Vermont, we've known the importance of beech nuts for bears. So we've actually been monitoring beech nut availability throughout the state since the 1980s. We also know that acorns can also serve as a really important food for bears and other wildlife. So we also evaluate the availability of acorns statewide as well. And so this figure is showing us the results of those surveys. The orange bars represent our annual beech nut counts throughout the state, and then those gray shaded areas represent the acorn availability statewide. And then you can see here at the bottom, I'll pull this over, I've put those dashed lines in. So that lower orange dashed line, anything below that represents what we consider poor beech nut availability from a wildlife perspective for that year. And then that gray dashed line, anything below that represents poor acorn availability from a wildlife perspective. And so if you can look all the way to the far side of that figure for 2024, you'll see last year we had a poor beech nut crop from a wildlife perspective. I think out of all of the surveys we conducted statewide, only one of our staff found a single beech nut statewide. So again, that real boom and bust masting cycle. Whereas the previous year in 2023, you can see that orange line is way up there. So we had some sites where we were counting hundreds of beech nuts. Interestingly, if you look in 2024, you'll see the acorn crop was relatively decent from a wildlife perspective. But then in 2023 and 2022, both those years we had really poor acorn production. And I just show this to kind of give you all a sense that there are these kind of boom-bust cycles naturally happening on the landscape that wildlife have to deal with. But for the most part, at least one of those nut sources is usually available for wildlife, depending where you are in the state. All right, and now I'm going to show some examples of how bears are actually interacting with these beech habitats on the landscape. This figure is a little hard to see in this lighting, but the data I'm about to show you is from a study we recently wrapped up over in Searsburg and Reedsboro, Vermont, so not too far from here, where we were looking at the impacts of the Deerfield Wind Project on black bear use of these big concentrations of bear-scarred beech, which are those kind of gray shaded polygons on the map. So in this area, we have over 3,000 acres of concentrated bear-scarred beech habitat. And so we had a number of bears wearing GPS collars, and we were monitoring their use of these habitats. And so this first map is showing the locations of an adult female bear we had collared from 2014 to 2018. Those yellow circles are the GPS locations collected from her collar. You can see that yellow line near the top, that's Route 9. So her kind of core home range was really centered around Searsburg, just south of Route 9, and down into the north kind of western corners of Reedsboro. And then you can kind of see at the bottom there some of those blackish gray polygons representing the bear-scarred beech. And now if we put up her locations just from October 1st through November 15th, in 2015, when we had a really good beech nut crop in that study area, you see all of her locations sucked right into those bear-scarred beech concentrations. So during those fall months, when beech nuts are available, this bear was spending the vast majority of her time in that beech habitat foraging on beech nuts. But again, as I mentioned with that figure of showing you kind of our beech mass cycles in the state, we know every year is not going to look like this for bears. So what did this bear do in one of those years when there were 0 beech nuts? Well, we actually saw that she moved south into northwestern Massachusetts to where the habitat changes from more of a beech-dominated forest into more of an oak-dominated forest. And so we saw somewhere in September, I don't remember the exact timing now, but she made this big southern movement, and that blue line there represents the Vermont-Massachusetts border. And she spent about 2 months in northwestern Massachusetts feeding on acorns. And then somewhere around late October to early November, she made a relatively straight line movement back up to where kind of that core home range of hers is, up in Searsburg, where she denned for the winter. And now here's another adult female that we had collared for that study. Again, to orient you to this map, so it's a little hard to read. So that dark kind of squiggly body of water there, that's Harriman Reservoir. So her home range was centered around Atherton Meadows Wildlife Management Area down in Reedsboro and Whitingham, just below Harriman Reservoir. And that's where she spent the majority of her time. And then again, in that fall of 2015, when we had that really abundant beech nut crop, we saw her make this kind of northwest movement up into those bear-scarred beech concentrations, where she spent about 2 months feeding on beech nuts. But interestingly, she made 5 different trips during that fall. She'd go up, she'd feed, then she'd come back to her home range, then she'd go back up and feed, come back and forth, until ultimately, maybe around the second week in November, she came back down to Atherton Meadows Wildlife Management Area and entered her den for the winter. And then in the spring, she emerged from her den, spent maybe a week kind of bouncing around in the WMA, and then turned around and went right back up into those beech stands for another 2 weeks to feed on those beech nuts after the snow melt. But before they sprouted into seedlings, they're still viable for wildlife to feed on. And a neat thing to think about this is that there's plenty of beech trees in Atherton Meadows Wildlife Management Area as well. And there's a lot of beech trees between Atherton Meadows and where she ultimately went up. But it's that real concentration of the food source that seems to be really attractive to bears. They want a lot of mature beech trees all together.
How do they know?
Oh, that's a question we can't fully answer. We know they have a really great sense of smell. We know that they're relatively long-lived animals. They can live for decades. They seem to have really good memories. So we don't know, could she smell the beech nuts? Had her mother brought her there as a cub and she remembers it? Had she just done a random walkabout at some point before we put a collar on her so that she knew? Yeah, this honestly isn't even one of the bigger movements we documented with this study. They have an amazing way to find food on the landscape. And then this same bear, if we go back to 2014 when our beechnut crop failed, just like the last bear I showed you, this bear also traveled south into northwestern Massachusetts, into the oak forests, to feed on acorns as an alternate food source. And then just like that last bear, once it was time to den for the winter, she went back up to that core home range that she's most comfortable with. All right, so I've just talked about, and I'll say one more thing about that beech-oak relationship, is that when the beech nuts were abundant, we were not seeing bears travel into oak stands. They are selecting for beech over oak when both of those are equally available on the landscape. There is a strong preference for beech nuts. And any of you, if you're not able to figure out why that might be, I recommend you go out and you try eating a beech nut versus eating a red oak acorn, and you'll quickly understand why the preference is there. What is going to happen if beech leaf disease takes out the majority of our beech trees in Vermont? We are going to lose this food source for bears. Are we going to see changes in the size of our bear population and the distribution of our bear population as a result of this? Probably, at least on the short term. We will probably see things looking differently for a while. Bears are going to try to find an alternate food source, though. And so are we going to see an increase in potential conflicts between people and bears in their search for alternate foods? Quite possibly as well. And this is because we know that natural food availability is one of the major drivers behind what kind of pushes bears into human-dominated spaces and ultimately leads to potential conflicts between people and bears. There's a lot of research out there across black bear range showing that for the majority of bears, they on average want to be eating those wild foods that they evolved to eat. But when those foods are scarce on the landscape due to crop failures and seasonal variability, they're going to find another food source. And that often will drive them into new places looking for foods. And that can lead to them trying out things like bird feeders, garbage, backyard chickens. And what we know about bear behavior is that these are really smart animals. Every meal is a learning experience for them. And so every opportunity for them to figure out about all the foods we have in our backyards is potentially going to lead to a change in their strategies to finding food. And it can lead to things that we call food conditioning, where a bear now, instead of preferring to go for those wild natural foods, is now making foraging for human-caused foods a regular part of its behavior. And then that can also, all that time spent around human infrastructure, around us, around our barking dogs, can eventually lead to what we call habituation, where all of a sudden they're not as wary around us anymore. They're a little bit more confident to come in maybe while you're sitting on your back deck and try to grab your bird feeder right out from under you. And those are the things that we want to avoid because they result in a lot of property damage and potential risks to both bears and people. So a big thing that we're really trying to recommend to folks, even without thinking about beech leaf disease on the landscape potentially impacting bear food sources, is just to proactively follow this kind of bear-wise checklist. Proactively going out and figuring out ways to securely store your garbage, minimize the odors of your garbage. Don't feed birds during the spring, summer, and fall months when bears are potentially active. Learn about how to properly compost in bear country, which I'm excited we have someone here who can speak to that. Learning how to use an electric fence properly to deter bears, especially if you have backyard chickens or bees. Cleaning your grill after using it every time, securely storing any animal feeds, not feeding pets outside. And another one that we're trying to recommend to people is, scare bears when you see them in your backyard. Take some steps to make them feel uncomfortable in human-dominated spaces. so that they're less confident to come in and try to raid your garbage shed. And then also we're recommending to folks to report their bear incidents to us. We have staff available, so every report we receive from the public, someone will follow up with that person either by email or phone and try to offer technical assistance. They'll even schedule site visits if needed to try to help folks figure out effective strategies for what's going on at their home. So again, just thinking about the proactive things we can do, beyond just kind of being bear wise and securing attractants. Again, there are things we can think about from the habitat level, right? We want to be promoting these kind of massed species in our forest. So those species that are producing the nuts and fruits that bears and other wildlife want to feed on. You know, beech trees are an important one, and it's one we've really been working with private landowners to help them retain and promote where appropriate. But thinking about things like oak. Guilford is lucky. You guys live in a place where oak likes to grow. So you do have the potential to create opportunities for alternate food sources from that like nut perspective for bears. But black cherry, wild apples, those are other great species that can also produce good food sources for bears and other wildlife. Young forest habitat is another really important habitat type to help produce foods for bears and other wildlife. So creating those areas that can support things like blackberries and raspberries, some of our choke cherries and poon cherries and species like that. And again, if you're thinking about managing your woodlot to try to promote these foods for bears and other wildlife, talk to a professional, talk to your county forester, talk to a consulting forester to kind of get professional advice on that. And that's it.
Thank you, Jackie. Wow, so much information. I thought that we'd start with a series of questions that we already have developed and that we've received from other folks around the state. We've had interest in today's presentation from as far up as Marshfield, Vermont. It's pretty far up. And some local folks have sent us some questions too. So in no particular order, let me put this one to you, Savannah. On transmission of the disease and the human's role in it, is there anything that we can do to reduce its spread that we should or shouldn't do?
Yeah, so like a lot of our other invasives, we want to try to not move it around the landscape intentionally. So if you're out looking to plant American beech and you go to a nursery and you see something that's symptomatic, don't buy it. Let the nursery owner know. They work closely with the Agency of Ag and we can get that taken care of. But besides that, if you have infested beech leaves, try to compost them on your own property. Don't bring them to a town composter or somewhere else in Vermont that doesn't have a beech leaf disease infestation yet.
Great, thank you. And a related question for you, Savannah. You mentioned Vermont invasives. Since we know beech leaf disease is all around Guilford, should we still be filing reports with Vermont invasives?
Yeah, I think this would be a good opportunity if you're inside of Guilford to switch to looking for our lingering or clean beech. Yeah. So if you're out and about and you see a clean beech, have you ever heard that term before? When you don't have beech bark disease, you just walk into the woods and you're like, wow, that's what an American beech is supposed to look like. There's no cankers, there's no scale, and every time you see it, you make a little mental note of it. Keep an eye on those trees, and if you're finding them and they don't have beech leaf disease as well, let us know about them. I want to start an Excel spreadsheet where we can start tracking these.
Fantastic. Okay, that's homework assignment number 1. Let's see, Jackie, we've talked about the various relationship with bear and soft and hard mast. What other wildlife do you think we might see population changes in if we have continued decline of beech mast?
Yeah, it's hard to guess. Wildlife, it surprises us in their resiliency time and time again. But as I showed on that slide with the little silhouettes of different species, I mean, there's so many that feed on beech nuts that are going to be directly impacted. And then again, the predators that they feed will be indirectly impacted. So it's something we're thinking about, at Fish and Wildlife and worrying about. We do expect there's going to be a ripple effect. The benefit is that, we do have a lot of other food sources available to wildlife. Quality may not be as high as something like a beech nut, and the timing of the beech nuts going into winter are so important. So it's really just going to be kind of a monitoring situation from our perspective.
Great, thanks. I wanted to switch the conversation a little bit to what to do with diseased trees. And I guess there are a couple of parts to this. One is, Savannah, will you talk about what we know about chemical treatments that might or might not be usable, helpful, and the state of research?
Yeah, so right now the only registered pesticide that we have in Vermont for beech leaf disease is Arbortech 20S. So this is an injectable. It goes in at the basal root flares of the beech trees. They started doing it higher on the tree trunk, but it was causing these cracks. But when you do it on the root flares, it actually takes that really well. So this is the most effective treatment that we have thus far. If you're doing a quick Google, you will see other treatments available. I'm putting quotes around that just because they're not registered in Vermont. So common ones are polyphosphite 30 or other polyphosphites. Broad form is also something you can find. And these were things that were tried out earlier in our southern New England states, but right now Arbortech 20S is the only thing that we can use in Vermont.
And would that be used for a specific individual tree, like one in a town common or something like that?
Yeah, so if you have a tree that you want to treat, it would just be for a singular application. You usually treat once every other year because a treatment can last 2 to 3 years, and you do it right after leaf expansion. And it's usually best for large trees, so if they're larger than like 10 inches, they do really well.
Good, thanks. And Sam, talk to us about trees that are suffering badly from both beech bark and beech leaf disease, and about the hazards that they pose to anybody or anything.
I guess my answer would be it depends on what you consider a hazard. I mean, we do know that standing dead trees are very beneficial ecologically and for wildlife habitat, and dead trees on the ground are also beneficial in other ways for microorganisms, etc. If there are dead or dying beech trees that are a danger to human infrastructure, trails, houses, barns, etc., then I'd recommend, that would be something to consider removing sooner than later. I think that's pretty well covers it. I do think that the smooth beech phenomenon is great. I've seen many of those in Guilford and other surrounding towns in Windham and Bennington counties, and it's worth not cutting those. I mean, oftentimes through forestry activities, we sort of focused on beech as an unwanted tree in the sense of for forest products. But we know it has so many other values. So if we can preserve the most vigorous, most healthy beech trees, then it's going to be better for all of us.
Thanks, Sam. And I'll point out that I know from communicating with local arborists that both in the beech trees and the ash trees, as they get to a point of pretty well dead, they get very unsound, and they're more dangerous for the tree climbing professionals. So, it comes to us to make a decision about, should we take this tree down? It's not healthy, it's not dead yet, but it's going to get more difficult to cut down at a later date if we need to. But I'm also hearing several of you saying, let's not go and mow down all the beech trees. Because we're looking for those examples of resistant individuals. Yeah, and good point too about all the habitat and nutrients that dead and dying beeches provide for. other things in the woods. I guess maybe this is a question for Jackie. Will we expect to see more conflicts between humans and bears as this goes on? And would you give us some advice so that we don't end up making the bears the enemy?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I didn't get into the nuance of with my presentation is that we do know there's a relationship, an indirect relationship between beech nut availability and the reports of human bear incidents that we receive from the public. But it's not directly driving it, right? So the beech nuts are available on the landscape. The peak is kind of happening right now. So it's really October, November, and then again, from a bear's perspective, in the early spring when snow melts before those seedlings sprout. But most of the human bear incident reports that we receive are happening in May, June, and July. So beech nuts aren't actually even a food source for bears. We've always assumed that we don't see a lot of conflicts happening in the fall because the wild foods are just so abundant in Vermont. The bears are going to choose to go into the beech stands. They're choosing to be in the oak stands or in the apple orchards because the food is plentiful. So will we see some sort of shift in that, and maybe we will start getting more conflict reports in the fall with beech kind of disappearing on the landscape if it does? That is one fear. But again, I think the best way to prevent us from feeling that knee-jerk reaction to scapegoat bears as the villain is to just start developing those bear-wise behaviors in ourselves before you start having a problem. And I cannot emphasize that enough. These animals are so clever and so persistent and can be so destructive that once they know you have food in your backyard and then you try to take it away from them, they're not going to take that lightly. They're going to try to get it back. And so we see sometimes with someone who's never had a bear issue and they're kind of doing a light version of securing their attractants, that usually can work for them. But if you've had bears in your backyard and then you try the light or easy version of securing your attractants, it's not going to work. They're just going to bust through it. And so you have to then level up your effort significantly to actually deter that bear that's already learned about your food source. So the more proactive you can be, the better it's going to be for you and the bears, and it'll keep people loving bears, hopefully.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think I saw a statistic that garbage is the #1 conflict with humans and bears. Compost is pretty high up. And garbage, and what else? Beehives.
Feeders.
Bird feeders.
And bird feeders.
Yeah, so it's garbage, bird feeders. Bird feeders and backyard chickens are kind of neck and neck at this point. But we also think bird feeders are probably an underreported problem.
You need to electrify bird feeders.
Yes, there you go. The birds will just do a data bomb grab. And then compost is kind of the next one down there. But we sometimes group compost and garbage together because they kind of work interchangeably with each other. And compost we think sometimes is underreported as well.
Okay, so Alex, let's ask you, what can you tell us about improving our compost management and our garbage management around town?
Yeah, just to repeat, that bears are very smart. So if they have visited your land in the past, they're gonna come back with a vengeance. So for somebody just starting to compost at home, you don't need as much, you won't need to put nails coming out of pieces of wood to have the bear step on it. You don't need to necessarily put up an electric fence right away, but you do need to know that compost is a human managed activity. You need plenty of carbon source, so more leaves than you expect. Straw, if you can afford it. Wood shavings are great. Yeah, you really need a good balance of nitrogen and carbon to make sure that that food is breaking down fast and that it's not attractive to wildlife. But I do want to point out that I've worked with the Vermont Wildlife Services when I do home backyard composting workshops at my work at the transfer station in Brattleboro. And they actually have done a lot of webinars with us saying that bird feeders were the #1 attractant to a person's land. Not to mention your neighbors, so you might not be the bad behavior person, but if your neighbor is, you likely have a problem and you have to go for the electric fence. Then once they're there for the bird seed, which is so high calorie and so valuable for them, then they'll go on to garbage and compost. So for composting, basics, make sure you have enough carbon, more than you think, on hand, nearby, ergonomically set so that you can put it on every time you add food. And yeah, secure it, especially if you have small children or dogs around. Some people like to see bears in their yard, that's fine. We don't want to habituate them to our land. So yeah, bird feeders underreported, that's what we've found. And you know, the more community connections you can have, the more relationships with your neighbors to get the word out, then you can kind of in tandem not have those attractants around as a group.
Thanks, Alex, for that. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions and then we'll open it up to you all. On the idea of replacing beech trees with other trees to get planting, you know, presumably we want mass-producing trees like other oaks, for example, but what all is involved in planting successive trees to take the place of beech? And the second part of that question is, and deer browse. So, but the first part, anybody want to take, is this one you want to take, Sam, talk about planting other trees?
I guess I'd start off by saying I wouldn't go to planting as the first choice. That's well, I wouldn't say hardest approach, but I mean, if you have land, if you're a landowner, forest landowner, and have enough land to manage the forest, then you may do some management approaches that actually foster native oak regeneration. So you don't necessarily have to default to, I must plant. That said, you brought up deer. That's a serious issue that we're seeing over the past couple of decades. Deer browse the trees that we also favor, and so young oak trees, young maple trees, young ash trees, those are all preferable to deer. So it involves protection, or it involves maybe more cultural work than we're used to doing. Maybe fencing an area where you do some sort of opening in your forest, leaving oaks on the periphery of an opening so the acorns can fall in and naturally seed in. Or maybe it involves tree tubes or some sort of tree protection device where you find individual seedlings or saplings and protect them from deer browse or moose browse, or so something that's basically keeps them out of what we refer to as browse height. So something 4 feet and higher, usually it's getting pretty safe getting out of browse height. Typically 6 to 8 feet is like bingo, you got it. You can declare a success as far as getting out of browse height. But all of those approaches come with other issues, as a lot of us in here know about invasive plants, and so it's not just a one and done sort of approach. It's if you decide to plant, if you decide to do some sort of silvicultural activity that ideally results in early successional habitat, you may and very well would have to protect the established regeneration and deal with potential establishment of invasive plants or ferns. So it involves a level of stewardship and sort of land ethic that's A+. It's not just, I'll try a little bit. If you're gonna do it,
You gotta go on.
yeah.
Anything else?
I guess I just wanted to plug that there's going to be no species that you could plant that would take the place of American beech on our landscape. So when you're thinking about replacement species, as we call it, you have to think about what ecosystem service you're trying to overlap with. Besides food for wildlife, there's also food for insects. There's mycorrhizal communities that are going to be affected by the loss of beech. So really dialing into like how you want to fit a puzzle piece into this landscape.
I have one thing to add. In addition to being a waste outreach coordinator, I was also a native plant landscaper for a time. And it's hard work. So when you're on your own land, you want to think about how can you make your life easier. So if you are thinking about planting new things, maybe do that at a time where you notice invasives. Okay, I'm going to remove these invasives. What comes after removing those? New invasives will come in. Maybe natives will, but maybe time it. You're going to remove a big woody invasive plant. That's where you might put a similar structured, shrub or tree. And also a plug for bare root plants. You're not transporting weird soil from wherever or from big box stores that often come with other invasive plants and insects, jumping worms, that kind of thing. So if you can hook up with a forestry nursery and get bare root, it's a lot easier on your back and better for the soil.
I have a question actually for Jackie.
Hi. Do you know of any similar, it's a stretch of a question, similar size state with a similar sort of bear population that doesn't have beech as a component? And how that, it's awfully broad, and I know the answer is it depends, but how do those bear populations thrive and survive if they do?
Yeah, so I'll say to start that question off, Vermont is a little unique in how dependent our bears are on beech. And I think it has to do with the distribution of beech in our state and at least the recent past distribution of our bear population, which for a long time was really restricted to the spine of the Greens in the Northeast Kingdom, which are parts of the state that really support a lot of beech trees. But we've seen over the past 15-ish years, as bears start getting more into the valley parts of our states where our habitats diversify more away from beech, there's different things happening in those places. But then zooming out, you look to our twin state over in New Hampshire, which would be the easiest comparison to make. But again, things are just a little different over there, and a lot more of New Hampshire supports oak than we do here in Vermont. So parts of New Hampshire do see similar relationships between bears and beech to what we see at a broader statewide level here. Parts of Maine also do, but Maine, again, their forests are different. Some of their forest management practices are different. Beech doesn't make up, mature concentrations of beech don't make up the Maine woods like they used to back in the 70s and 80s. But all that being said, bears live from Canada down to Florida and Mexico and all over. So they live in plenty of habitats that don't have American beech. They live in the boreal forest. There's very little hard mass, if any, to speak of up there. They live in tropical environments, desert environments. These are very flexible animals, adaptable animals. It doesn't mean, though, in the short term that, for a few decades, if we lose beech, there's going to be a hard transition happening, but I'm not worried that we're going to lose our bears because of it. There's going to be some growing pains, I think.
Thank you, everybody. Let's see, I have a question that came from Conservation Commission member over in Vernon.
That's me. I did
Oh.
text her,
Well, thank you for coming. So I'll try to describe the pictures you sent. They were diseased with the beech leaf disease nematode, but they also had what looked like a scale insect on them. Can you address that, Savannah?
Yeah, so those photos are just of beech blight aphids. So they're one of the insects that are entirely dependent on American beech. They're native in our environment, or part of a nice, diverse ecosystem. So they're not causing a lot of damage that the tree can't handle.
So not every disease that the beeches encounter is going to be fatal.
Yeah, there's insects and diseases on every plant species, and if it's native to our environment, affecting a native plant, they've co-evolved together, so they're able to only take kind of what they need, and the tree's able to, or the plant in question is able to fight off, so they keep their populations in check with each other.
You could Google it, that's the boogie woogie, you could,
Yeah.
yeah, they actually like boogie woogie.
The boogie woogie.
They do like a thing.
You can find them on the like branches in masses. They like wiggle back and forth.
Do they have a TikTok?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the group today? Yes.
Well, thank you for being here and for doing all this. I live just on Sweet Pond Road down the way here, and we have high density of beech, and we've been there 4 years, and we had pre-existing beech bark disease and started seeing beech lead disease in late May or early June of 23, I think it was. And, you know, prior to us being there, there was certainly a lot of root sprout beech, which I presume to be stress on the mature beeches from the beech bark disease that was already there, that was creating these dense pockets and thickets of beech saplings. And now with the information that the Beech Lead Disease is adding to the picture and causing additional stress on those same trees, and how we've heard some theories about it traveling, I guess, from the understory upwards. I don't know if that's fair to say, but if there's any advisement about more deliberately removing brush trimmers or motorist trimmers, whatever, removing some of that understory thicket that would already have almost complete mortality rate anyways, that would maybe open up some understory. Obviously leaving more mature trees, healthier trees, mid-sized trees. I don't know if there's any advice around
Thank you.
removing those understory dense.
So, first of all, Savannah, will you let us know about beech suckering, and is it a tree's particular response? And then is there a recommendation to clear those young affected root suckers?
Yeah. So beech trees love to sucker, and they do sucker for a variety of reasons. It's kind of why we typically try to harvest in the winter when we're not causing a lot of disturbances to the roots, because that can cause suckering. It can be a stress response with beech bark disease, and they'll pop up as well. As far as removing the understory, we do see that with some of our other invasive pests, like our hemlock woolly adelgids. If they're infesting the regeneration, they can kind of work their way up to the larger overstory trees. For beech leaf disease, we don't have a lot of evidence supporting that type of management yet, but there's some experiments going on in New York as well as Connecticut, and we're hoping to start soon in Vermont, trying to trial some of these silvicultural methods. But right now, we just don't know.
Good, thank you very much. Yes?
When you inoculate a tree, I'm assuming you're inoculating to protect a healthy tree, not to cure a sick tree.
These injections would be for a sick tree.
Ah.
So with the Arbortech 20S, it's most effective when you have a larger size diameter tree, and you're already seeing some like 25 to 50% symptoms, so that leaf banding in your canopy. So the fungicide isn't a preventative, it's targeting those nematodes.
But in a tree that's in a severe state of decline, it wouldn't be worth the effort, probably.
It would probably be a pretty high cost, so I guess that would depend on what your resources available are.
Well, what we've seen is that, like in Green River Village, we inoculate the ash that's in the middle of the triangle because it's a beautiful tree and we're trying to protect it. So this is the opposite. You're trying. So if we find trees on our land that are not completely gone but seem like a suitable candidate, those are the ones we should focus on with the beech.
Yeah, if they're already infested. Emerald ash borer is a little different. That is a preventative insecticide, and it's also a different insect and a different part of the tree that it's causing harm to. So emerald ash borer is in your vascular cambium, which is like your trunk and branches, and it's a beetle. So the way that a chemical interacts with that is different than a roundworm, just because they're different organisms.
Thanks.
Savannah has a related question to this. Is there ongoing research for other types of chemical treatments that we might know more in a year or two, or?
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on at every level, so state, university, federal levels. Bartlett tree experts have been actually probably leading the charge for beech leaf disease treatments. So we're learning from our other states. We were the last state in New England and kind of like that northern, eastern parts of the US that found beech leaf disease to begin with. So we have the advantage of learning from our neighbors, and we're constantly on calls, and we're trying to get as much research and understanding as possible.
Great. Yes, sir.
Did I understand right? You said if the tree has the capacity to put out a second set of leaves, those leaves will not be infected? Because, in the understory in the woods around here, there seemed to be a moment that new leaves were coming out, but most of them looked lousy. But there are some big old beech out in the open near the house. They've got a pretty good canopy, even though they have some diseased leaves, but they don't look as effective as all the trees in the understory. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so a tree might be able to drop those heavily infested leaves, and then if they flush it out, that next leaf could be asymptomatic. Well, it would be asymptomatic, but whether or not it has residual nematodes from the bud scale is up for grabs right now. We don't know how the nematodes get into the tree to begin with. So we know that it's in the leaf litter, it's able to survive over the winter in the leaf litter can dry out and it's still surviving, and then somehow it's getting back up into the tree. So we don't know if it's entering through the root system and then going up the vascular cambium, or maybe it's on the outside of the tree with the dew, because nematodes typically need water in order to move around, they can sling their bodies back and forth. So even though it could theoretically drop all of its leaves, nematodes could be anywhere on the tree, getting into the bud tissue the next time it's produced. So even though it looks great now, next season it still might be symptomatic.
Thank you. Good question. And I had heard that chickadees and nuthatches and some birds can actually pass them live through their digestive tract, or maybe even in their plumage. So is this a battle we'll never win if the birds are moving it around?
Yeah, so that is true. And it's actually pretty cool for the nematode to be able to do that. Let's acknowledge that. But I think more importantly, like the wind is the biggest issue, is that we're worried that if it's wind dispersed, which we've been able to at least show proof of concept. So we have spore traps, so we can find nematodes in there. If you put a piece of paper or giant microscope slide on the ground and then bring it back inside, you can find beech leaf disease nematodes on that because they're just in the air all the time. That's much harder to control. So
we're breathing.
Year ones do a really great job at getting rid of things that don't belong to us, so I wouldn't worry about it at all. But
You walk through the woods taking the nematode.
yeah, I don't think it's the major concern. If you had an ornamental European beech, for example, I know I'm from Massachusetts, and European beeches are planted as a common landscape tree. Maybe don't put a bird feeder right next to it, but right now I think it kind of doesn't matter as much.
Yes.
Off that point about their transmission, is there any belief or hope that this year's drought especially has affected or slowed the transmission in any discernible way, or is that just...
I fear the opposite might be true. If we just think of the drought that we're in as a giant stress agent, that usually it's death by a million cuts. This is going to be a really big deal that the tree is losing that fibrous root system. Maybe they're not photosynthesizing as much, they're dropping leaves a little earlier. Those are all things that are just going to compound, so they have less energy to be able to fight off the beech leaf disease nematodes. I think one thing that saved us a few years ago was actually our late season freeze event that we had. So that was the year we really thought we were going to pick up beech leaf disease pretty statewide, but as you can recall, we lost the leaves of all of our oaks and beech, it seemed, overnight. After we had full flush. It was actually the earliest flush I think we had in 30 years for our leaves, so it was really surprising. But then we had a flush of asymptomatic leaves, like we had with beech leaf disease. So I think that gave us a year to catch up.
Good. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't imagine that anybody knows what the long-term impact of the beech leaf disease is going to be on the bear population. And I wondered whether hunting season for bears would ultimately be adjusted as a result of what you learned.
Sounds like a question for Jackie.
That's, I was looking at it.
We've talked about that, and it's like you can argue it. We're thinking about it from both ends, like,
Right.
right. We're potentially going to be seeing one of our major food sources go away, and so is the state going to be able to support the same number of bears? And do we try to preemptively manage for that by trying to reduce bear populations, at least in the the mountainous parts of the state in the Northeast Kingdom where we have more beech trees? But yeah, we're talking about it. We're thinking about different strategies. Again, to be honest too, it's hard. Our hunting seasons are designed at a statewide level right now for bears, at least. We don't really have it structured at a regional level. And it's a complicating factor that we're certainly evaluating, but I don't have like a specific strategy that we've all decided that's what we should do. Yeah.
And how's the population?
And and the other side of it, right, is the population right now, we're at a high point. We're in that like 6,000 to 8,000 range for bears, which is really more than we've ever had in the state. And so we're already feeling some stress points associated with that anyway. And so what's that going to look like if our population still stays at this really high point and then we pull out this major food source?
Right.
But our bear population is always kind of in this undulating pattern, so it's hard to know by the time this takes effect at a level that impacts statewide food source. Yeah, we kind of have to also just see where we're at. And again, bears are just one of the many populations that rely on beech nuts. It's all complicated.
You gotta get that crystal ball.
We need that crystal ball. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'll say we haven't even really talked much about the insects that rely on beeches, but I saw reference to about 100 different species of moths and butterflies, some of which are specifically related to the beech in their life cycle. So there's a lot that we won't even see, really, that we won't even notice. Jackie, you mentioned that the bear population used to be more in the spine of the Green Mountains and the Northeast Kingdom. What has changed in Vermont's landscape that we're seeing more bears, say, in the Connecticut River Valley?
It's really habitat recovery, so you think about when Europeans colonized the state, there was massive conversion from a forested landscape to an agricultural landscape. And like all those sheep pastures don't support bears. That's not good habitat for bears. And so it really was just kind of that period of farm abandonment and allowing our forests to regrow has allowed bears to kind of expand back to their former range. And so the reason bears were really retained in the spine of the Greens in the Northeast Kingdom is just that those were kind of our worst farmlands. So they were the most rugged, coldest parts of the state. They were harder to clear, harder to maintain as large expanses of agriculture. So that's why we kind of had these refugia habitats for bears in the state.
Great. Any other questions, folks? Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. Is there any hope and work going on finding some actual enemy of beech bark disease?
Beech bark or beech leaf
Beech bark.
disease?
No, beech bark disease.
Beech bark
Because
disease.
it looks so painful. The trees it does look painful.
Savannah, will you give us a little primer on beech bark disease?
Yeah. So again, beech bark disease is a native Neonectria fungi. It's a cankering pathogen. and then it's an introduced scale. And this beech scale is a piercing, sucking insect, so it has a straw-like mouthpart, and it's stabbing into the vascular cambium and sucking up all that photosynthase that's coming down from the leaves. And as it removes its stylet, it then gets infected with the Nectria pathogen, and that causes these cankers, and then the cankers girdle the tree. And 1 or 2 cankers are not terrible. If you've seen the beech in your backyard, it's hundreds of cankers, which is, again, that death of 1,000 cuts that's happening. So those cankers are stopping the spread of like water uptake up the tree and then food down the tree as they get bigger, because they're just shutting down those pathways. There's not much we do, I guess there's no biocontrol available for it. There are some insects, like the twice-stabbed lady beetle will seek out the beech scale and eat them. They're in our environment, but they're just, because it's an invasive pest, it's not something that they're able to keep up with at that level. So yes, there's things feeding on it, but not enough to knock down populations. Yeah, and I guess on the urban landscape, there are some fungicides on the market where kellysolutions.com/Vermont is a great resource to look at. You can look up by pest or pathogen, as well as just if you know the active ingredient, you can look up any registered pesticide in Vermont. So if you're looking at beech bark disease, it will give you a whole list of things and how you should apply it. If you need a pesticide applicator license to do so, or if a homeowner can do it. So that might be a good resource if you had a couple trees in your backyard that you really were passionate about saving. But for the most part, we just don't have, like, management-wise, a really good way to manage it on the landscape.
Do you know, would those be already, like, to Steve's question, would they already be showing signs of beech bark disease, the ones to treat?
Yes, yeah.
Very good.
Oh, I have a quick question. Is
Yes.
Alex gonna talk about congregate composting here as a solution for people in Guilford to deal with their compost?
I'm sure she is. We'll give her the mic.
Okay, so, yeah, we don't have all the answers on how to deal with wildlife, but you're all here because you're in love with nature. Congratulations, we're all a part of it, we're not separate. And what we do in our daily lives and how we treat what we choose to buy and what we do with the excrements of what we buy matters and travels through the wind, through our water, through our soil. So, composting. Amazing. If you don't have access to composting, you can always drop it off at Women's Solid Waste. We compost it on site, and we take a lot of things that you might not want to compost at home. And in Guilford, we've set up a pilot compost drop-off at the elementary school for folks who don't feel comfortable or don't want to travel to Brattleboro to drop off food scraps. It can be smelly. But I just think that composting is one of the most responsible and tangible things that we can do with the stuff that we all interact with, food. So yeah, really important. And we do home composting workshops at the transfer station. I'll host one in late October and maybe a couple in early November. And if you're interested in composting at home, come to one of those or reach out to me. I have my cards just in case. And then if you want to be a member of this pilot, which is free until the end of December, you're welcome. We have space. It's an excellent way to not habituate bears to your area. There still are a lot of folks who just throw food out the back door. Yeah, they eat it. Yeah, they get nutrients from it. But that's leading them to keep coming back and depend on humans, which is irresponsible, and we can't anthropomorphize what they want. Were you talking about the pilot mostly? Yeah. So it's just a secure, well-managed, safe space. The principal of the school promises he wants you to come and use it. We have a little combination lock on it. It's basically a dog kennel with a roof, so wildlife's not coming in, and folks who aren't accustomed to how to use it aren't coming in and abusing the system. So please feel welcome, and I have tips and tricks on how to interact with that really well. Unrelated to Beech Lead Disease, food scraps in a landfill aren't composting, they're not breaking down, they are releasing methane into our air. And methane, as you all know from when you tried to light your farts on fire, is flammable. So think about that as a greenhouse gas. Yeah, no, and turning it into something that can then, yeah, we'll have a demonstration after, once BCTV's gone. Yeah, just like complete these natural circles in our lives. That's my theme. You know, if you can create a resource that then grows your own food and also native plants. Check out native plant nurseries. There's plenty locally. There's some cool websites for native plant finders to find exactly the right type of plant you want for your area. Compost can help. You don't need too much compost for native plants though, so don't overdo it. I could go on. Yeah.
So you're a centralized drop-off area for plant material and
Plant food, meat, bones, dairy,
right.
certified
So
compostable plastic.
we can't burn right now. And so it occurred to me when I brought all of my branches and all of that stuff to Wyndham Solid Waste, how do you prevent these invasives from then being collecting there and then redistributing them out into the
Sure.
individual
So we do have a brush drop off at Wyndham Solid Waste. So people can bring branches, sticks, woody material larger than an inch. That gets stored on our property temporarily, and then it actually moves on down the road to D&D Tree. They take care of our brush for us. So that would be more of a question for Anson, see what he's doing with it. Because yes, often there are invasives that go in there, and yes, right now is a time when the invasives have their fruiting bodies on them. They have their viable seeds. So another timing piece for when you deal with stuff, right? Take care of invasives when they don't have their seeds on them, if you can. But you know, if you can't, that's fine. We also have leaf and yard trimmings drop off, free to use, don't need a access sticker, and we incorporate that stuff, which doesn't include invasives or woody material, into our compost, which then gets redistributed in our area. So yeah, that would be a question for D&D Tree, which is located in Guilford. He takes our brush for us. Yeah.
Yes,
Really quick for Jackie, when the bears go these long distances, do they have to argue with the bears in Western Massachusetts, or is there enough to go around?
It's a great question. As best we can tell, bears are engaging in what we call resource sharing. And so they have their own kind of social hierarchy that they kind of determine on their terms. And so they have a way of kind of taking turns. Dominant bears, as best we know, kind of get first choice. And the lower you are on the bear totem pole, you take the scraps where you can get them, kind of thing. So you know, if you put out game cameras in your backwoods or go on any social media, and you can find all sorts of feeds with like game camera footage of bears doing all sorts of funny scent marking on trees and stuff. And so they have ways of communicating with each other, which we think contributes to that communication of resource sharing. But what we've seen is like, you know, when we had all those bears collared in that Searsburg, Reedsboro area, I mean, they were all just like, in terms of like their home ranges, really kind of piled on top of each other. They will fight with each other and stuff, but again, I think they want to avoid that confrontation and getting injured, so they take turns.
thank you. The wood waste question brought up something I'll let you know about as somebody who grows mushrooms in the woods on wood resources. I'm engaged in 2 different experimental projects right now where we're using beech canker wood from beech bark disease and cutting those into 1 meter long bolts and inoculating them with a variety of shiitake mushroom that's been found to adapt pretty well to beech logs. And then very shortly we'll be inoculating beech tree trunks that are resulting from cutting down highly diseased beech trees. with a series of oyster mushroom inoculations and comb tooth, which is one of the similar to lion's mane. And that'll be an experiment going on for the next couple of years to see if we can intentionally inoculate those beech stumps with a useful food resource for people. And we'll get back to you with our findings in a while. So to wrap it up, I'm just going to ask my panelists if they have anything that they wanted to say today that they didn't say yet. Now's your chance.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. I know this can feel like a heavy topic, like I said before. I'm hoping that you are leaving here feeling a little bit better and a little bit more knowledgeable. You can report all invasives to btinvasives.org. We do know the distribution of Beech Lead Disease pretty well here in Guilford, but if you have any other pests or if you're outside of Guilford traveling, please feel free to continue reporting it.
I'll just say again, if you are having issues with bears, go to the Vermont Fish and Wildlife website. If you just, Google search Vermont living with bears, it should bring you to our website where our reporting form is. And if you really just want to beef up on your bear coexistence knowledge, I highly recommend bearwise.org. It's a really great resource to learn more.
I guess I'd say one of the coolest things in nature is that we don't know, and we're hopefully never going to know it all. I'd like to think that's going to be the case, and so that leads me to back to the smooth beech phenomenon. Like if you have smooth beech trees or find them, and I don't really know exactly at what size they're you can declare they're not going to show signs of beech bark disease, but I've seen beech that are like 6 to 8 inches that are smooth, but then years go by and they're a little bit bigger and they show signs of beech bark disease. So typically I tell landowners like a 12-inch diameter or greater beech tree that's smooth and doesn't show signs of beech bark disease is probably going to be one of those resilient and or resistant ones. So keep those on the landscape, just as well as, with the other diseases and insects that Savannah talked about. Just because we have hemlock woolly adelgid or elongate hemlock scale or emerald ash borer, it doesn't mean we need to cut all those trees. We definitely don't want to. They're not to say don't cut any of them. There's definitely management approaches which would warrant harvesting those species in the right space, but it shouldn't be thought of as, well, this species is done for, so we'll just sort of throw it aside. I mean, all of you came here because you don't think like that, so, but that's my message.
Just to hop on Jackie's thing, the report of bear is such a great function. It not only helps the Vermont Wildlife Services understand the movement of bears and their behavior and how it's changing over time, but they have some really excellent advice. And a little trick is if you report once, you might not get someone to visit you, but if you report twice, you become a hot spot. And someone will come and help you, especially if you're like, oh my gosh, I've had an issue with bears breaking into my trash or my compost. They will help you beef up your security and get you to where you need to be so that you feel safe in your own home and you're not habituating. So they've got you on the security task force for the compost, trash, bird seed recommendations. And if you need help with compost recipes, I can help for home composting. I can also help try and navigate what is dropping off look, how do I keep my life mess free, and how do I, participate in that useful behavior.
Thank you very much again for attending today and for your consideration. And if you have further questions, you can seek me out, Matty Stinchfield, your town tree warden, and we will connect you with the right expert. Thanks and have a super weekend.